The desert wind howls, dust stings the eyes, and before you stretches a wasteland so vast it feels as if the earth itself has died. Scattered across the valley floor lie bones, thousands upon thousands of them. Sun-bleached skulls grin up at the burning sky, ribs cracked and splintered, spines twisted and broken. The remains of a people long forgotten, stripped of flesh, stripped of name, stripped of hope. And in the middle of this graveyard, a prophet stands, alone. Ezekiel, a man who has already seen visions that shook him to the core. Wheels within wheels, living creatures covered in eyes, the glory of God rising above a burning temple. Yet nothing prepared him for this. The valley is silent. Until, click, a single sound, the faint scrape of bone against bone. Ezekiel freezes. His breath catches. The hairs rise on the back of his neck. Then another sound, closer this time. Clack, clack, clack. What was scattered begins to shift. Femurs roll across the dust. Skulls tip forward. Arm bones slide toward rib cages. A rattling echoes across the valley as thousands of bones drag themselves across the sand, pulling toward one another. Imagine standing there. Imagine hearing it, the sound of death reversing itself, the sound of the grave undone. But undone. Into what? Would these bones rise as men again, with flesh, faces, and voices restored? Or would they remain skeletons, walking mockeries of life, hollow-eyed and soulless? Why would God show his prophet such horror? Why awaken silence that was meant to stay silent? Ezekiel cannot move, he cannot breathe, and then, through the stillness, he hears the voice of God. Son of man, can these bones live? The question hangs in the air like thunder refusing to break. What answer could there be? Bones do not live, they do not breathe, they do not rise. Yet the one who asks is the master of life and death. Ezekiel's harshes. Apius tremble as he whispers the only words possible. O Lord God, you know. And then, silence again. The prophet waits, the valley waits, the bones wait. But the answer does not come. Not yet. And so we are left with the same question Ezekiel faced. Can these bones live? If they do, what will they become? Soldiers of flesh and blood ready to march again? Shadows of men cursed to wander? Or a sign of something even greater, an echo of the final day when graves everywhere may open? This is the valley of dry bones, a place where hope and horror meet, where the silence of death trembles under the weight of God's question. The bones wait still, and the question is not only Ezekiel's, it is yours. Can these bones live? For more stories like this, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Bible Unseen. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I find it incredible that we can explore these mysteries of Scripture together from all around the world. The Valley of Bones was no accident. To understand why God led his prophet there, you have to step back into Israel's darkest hour, a time when the nation itself felt like it had already died. The year was 586 BC. Jerusalem, the holy city, was nothing but ruins. Its mighty walls lay in heaps of stone. The temple, once glittering with gold, was now blackened rubble. Smoke had choked its skies, and the songs of worship had been replaced by the screams of conquest. The Babylonians had come like a storm. They crushed Israel's armies, slaughtered its leaders, and chained its people. Sons watched their fathers beaten to the ground. Mothers clutched infants as soldiers tore them away. And those who survived the slaughter were forced onto the long march east, toward Babylon. Every step on that road was agony. Chains clattered against raw wrists, feet bled on the stones. Behind them lay the ashes of their homes. Ahead of them, a foreign land with foreign gods. Hope drained out of Israel like blood from an open wound. In Babylon, the days turned into years, and the years into decades. Families sat by rivers, staring into waters that carried no reflection of their old life. Harps hung silent on trees. The elders whispered, "We are finished. We are cut off. Our bones are dried. We are as good as dead." Imagine their despair. No city, no temple, no king, no freedom, only chains, humiliation, and silence. And in the silence, a question grew louder. Had God abandoned his people? This was more than exile. It was annihilation of identity. A people who were meant to be chosen now felt cursed. A nation that once believed it carried God's promise now felt forgotten. Think of it. When everything that defined your faith, your home, your dignity is stripped away, what remains? Are you still alive? Or are you only walking bones, waiting to fall into the dust? Israel's soul was broken, their spirit exiled, their hope a corpse. It is here, in this place of despair, that God gives Ezekiel the vision. But here's the haunting part. Why would God choose to show his prophet bones instead of hope? Why not a blooming garden? Why not a shining city rebuilt? Why bones, scattered, dry, lifeless? The answer must be more than comfort. It must be something that goes beyond the imagination of a captive people. Something terrifying enough to rattle not only Ezekiel, but every listener who would hear his words centuries later. Could it be that God was not just speaking to Israel, but to all of us? When your life feels ruined, when your prayers feel unanswered, when you whisper, "I am cut off, I am finished, I am dead inside." Could the Valley of Bones be more than history? Could it be a mirror showing us what we become when we lose hope? But then another question. If God could bring hope to a nation that was nothing but dust, what might he be able to do with us? This is why the vision begins not with life, but with death. Not with rebuilding, but with bones. Because bones do not deceive. Bones tell the truth. Without God, there is no life left. And yet, why would God drag his prophet into such a vision of horror? To frighten him? To humiliate Israel further? Or to reveal a secret so haunting, so beyond human comprehension, that it would echo for centuries? The desert wind still howls. The bones still wait. And Ezekiel, standing among them, trembles. But before God reveals anything more, he asks a question so piercing that it still cuts through time. "Son of man, can these bones live?" And the deeper question is this: can a nation that feels cut off be restored? Can a life that feels shattered be pieced back together? Can death itself be undone? Israel believed the answer was no, but Ezekiel was about to find out. The vision begins with movement. Ezekiel is taken, not by choice, but by force. The hand of the Lord seizes him, and the Spirit carries him away. One moment he is in Babylon, among the captives. The next, he is swept into a landscape unlike any other. It is not a mountain, not a city, not a temple. It is a valley, a wide, endless basin. The air is heavy, thick with silence, and the ground beneath his feet crunches, not with gravel, not with sand, but with something hollow, something that once lived. Bones, everywhere, scattered without order, broken without number, white under the sun, but dry, so very dry, like they had been dead for generations. Ezekiel is not simply shown this place from a distance. He is set down right in the middle of it. God makes him walk among the bones. Step after step, his sandals grind against skulls, against ribs, against femurs, long stripped of flesh. The prophet does not hurry. He cannot. The Spirit forces him to see, to feel, to count. The valley is not just a grave. It is an army of graves, and the message is unmistakable. These bones belong to people who once stood, fought, lived, laughed. Now they are nothing, not even corpses, just fragments of what once was. Imagine being Ezekiel, a prophet already haunted by visions too strange for words, chariots of fire, angelic wheels turning with eyes in every direction. But this is different. This is not just strange. This is terrifying. Because what Ezekiel sees in the dust is not only death, it is finality. Bones mean the end. Flesh rots, blood dries, but bones, they remain only to remind us that life is gone forever. So why here? Why now? Why would God drag his prophet through such a valley? Why force him to step over jaws and skulls, to look into empty sockets, to feel the crunch of ribs breaking beneath his heel? Perhaps because Ezekiel's people felt the same. In exile, Israel's spirit was broken. Their hope was not sick, it was dead, dry, forgotten. The prophet walks on, staring at the endless dead. And as he walks, a shadow of horror grows in his heart. What if this is all we are? What if this is all we become? And then, the voice. Low at first, then thundering across the valley. It is not the sound of man. It is not the echo of wind. It is the voice of the Almighty. Son of man, can these bones live? The words strike like lightning, not a statement, a question. Can they live? Ezekiel looks around him, at skulls piled in the dust, at rib cages collapsed into sand. The answer should be obvious. Bones do not live. They cannot rise. And yet, the voice asking the question is the same voice that spoke the world into existence. The same breath that gave life to Adam. The same power that split the Red Sea. What is Ezekiel to say? His mind screams no, but his spirit trembles at the possibility of yes. At last he whispers, "O Lord God, you know." It is the only answer he can give. But the question remains, why did God ask it at all? Was he testing Ezekiel's faith? Was he about to reveal hope to Israel? Or was he hinting at something even greater, a prophecy that points beyond Israel's exile to a day when graves across the earth might burst open? The prophet waits. The bones wait. The question hangs in the air. And we are left to wonder, if they live, what would they be? Flesh and blood? Or only skeletons walking in mockery of life? Soldiers? Ghosts? Shadows? Why would God awaken the long dead? And what will Ezekiel see next? Son of man, can these bones live? It was only 7 words, yet they shattered Ezekiel more than any vision of fire or judgment he had ever seen. Because this was not a riddle about politics or nations or kings. This was the question of existence itself. Look around the valley. The answer is obvious. No flesh, no blood, no breath, only bones. Bones do not think. Bones do not speak. Bones do not rise. But when God asks the impossible, silence is not an option. Ezekiel whispers, "O Lord God, you know." It was the safest answer, the truest answer, the only answer. But even as those words left his lips, the question kept echoing, not just in his ears, but across time itself. Because God did not ask this question only for Ezekiel. He asked it for every soul who would ever feel hopeless, forgotten, cut off. Can what is dead live again? Can broken lives be restored? Can nations in ashes be reborn? Can the grave itself surrender its grip? Ezekiel must have trembled at the thought. Because what if the answer was yes? What if bones could live? Then another question. How would they live? Would they rise as men again with flesh and faces? Would they return with laughter, with voices, with memory? Or would they rise as something other, skeletons clattering in mockery of life, hollow-eyed, cursed to march without purpose? And deeper still, why would they live? What purpose could demand the awakening of what had long been silent? Would God raise them for war, to terrify nations, to prove a point? Or was this a sign, a shadow of something humanity was not ready to face? The final resurrection, when the dead from every age stand again before their Creator. The question is not Ezekiel's alone. It belongs to us too. Because we all walk through valleys that feel like this. Valleys where prayers go unanswered, where dreams crumble, where hope dries up. And in those moments, we hear the same whisper. Can these bones live? Your bones, your life, your future. When you have nothing left, when the silence of death surrounds you, when everything you trusted has been torn apart, what then? Can bones live? Ezekiel's answer was safe. O Lord God, you know. But what would your answer be? Because the valley does not wait forever. The bones are not silent by accident, and the question is still echoing. Somewhere in this vision lies the secret of life after death, of hope after despair, of nations reborn from dust. But Ezekiel has not yet seen it. The bones lie still. The desert wind howls. The question hangs heavy, and we are left in the same place as the prophet, staring at death, waiting to see what God will do next. The question has been asked. The silence stretches on. Ezekiel stands in a valley where death reigns, and every bone around him waits. Then the voice comes again, not a whisper this time, but a command. Prophesy to these bones, and say to them, O dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. Imagine the weight of those words. Ezekiel is not told to preach to kings, or armies, or even the living. He is told to speak to the dead, to bones. It is the most absurd mission ever given to a prophet. Who talks to bones? Who delivers a sermon to skulls, to ribs, to spines lying shattered in the dust? Ezekiel must have hesitated, his throat dry, his lips trembling. What if nothing happened? What if the command was only a test? Worse, what if something did happen? The valley is silent, the bones are still, yet the command is clear: speak to them. This is the paradox of prophecy. God does not ask his servants to do what is logical. He asks them to do what is impossible. So Ezekiel draws in a breath. His voice echoes across the valley. O dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. The words hang in the air. Every syllable seems to sink into the dust. Skulls stare back, empty-eyed. What does it mean to speak to the dead? What does it mean to command silence to listen? Perhaps this is the very point. When all hope is gone, when nothing seems possible, when death has the final word, God demands faith. Faith to speak into the impossible. Faith to declare life where no life can be seen. But still, the question burns. What happens when a prophet speaks to bones? Will the valley remain silent? Will the echo of his words fade into nothing? Or will something stir beneath the dust, something too strange, too terrifying, too holy to imagine? The bones wait. Ezekiel waits. The silence of death trembles, as though listening. And once again, the question pierces through the vision. Can these bones live? Ezekiel has spoken. His voice has rolled across the barren valley, falling on ears that do not exist, echoing through rib cages hollow as drums. And then, silence. A silence so heavy it feels alive. The desert wind has stopped. The dust has stilled. Even the prophet's own breath seems caught in his throat. The bones lie scattered, sun-bleached and broken, their shadows long across the sand. They do not move. They do not answer. Was it madness to obey? To cry out to the dead? To summon bones that cannot hear, cannot feel, cannot respond? Ezekiel waits. His heart pounds. Every beat sounds like a hammer inside his skull. The command was clear: speak to the bones. But now what? What happens when nothing happens? Or worse, what if something does? Because deep in the silence of that valley is a tension, like the moment before a storm breaks, like the stillness before lightning splits the sky. What if the silence is not death, but listening? What if every bone in that valley, every skull, every hollow socket, every fractured rib has turned its attention toward the prophet's voice? What if the dead are not deaf? Ezekiel cannot know. He can only stand, trembling in the graveyard of nations, with the Almighty's words hanging in the air. The silence stretches. Too long, too heavy, too unbearable. And then, the ground seems to shift beneath his feet. Or does it? A trick of the wind? a tremor in his own imagination. He grips his robe tighter. His eyes dart across the valley floor. Nothing moves. Yet the silence feels as if it is about to crack. Like a drum waiting for the first strike. Like a grave waiting to break open. The bones are still, but they are not at rest. Not anymore. The valley is holding its breath. The silence is too thick to last. At first it is almost nothing. A faint vibration beneath the dust, so soft that Ezekiel wonders if his mind is inventing it. His heart races, and he holds his breath. Then it comes again. Click. The sound of bone touching bone. The prophet jerks his head toward the noise. A skull has shifted, rolling slightly in the dirt. Its hollow sockets stare at him as though awakened. Then, another. Clack. Clack. A femur sliding, scraping against stone. Ribs knocking together like the echo of a drum. The sound spreads. First in one corner of the valley, then another. Small clicks become rattles. Rattles become clattering. Until the whole valley seems to tremble with the sound of bones stirring, dragging, striking against one another. It is a sound unlike any other, terrifying, unnatural, the sound of death refusing to stay silent. Ezekiel's hands shake. His knees weaken. He cannot take his eyes from the movement all around him. Skulls topple forward, spines straighten. Hands of bone grope through the dust, pulling towards something unseen. The noise rises into a storm of rattling, echoing so loud it seems to shake the heavens themselves. What is happening? Ezekiel does not know. The bones are no longer still, but they are not yet alive. They are gathering, rearranging, forming something. But what? Is this life? Or is this something else, something darker? What if the valley becomes an army of skeletons, marching without flesh, without faces, without mercy? What if God is not raising hope, but horror? The question Ezekiel dreads returns with greater force than ever. Can these bones live? If they can, what will they become? The rattling grows louder, echoing against the walls of the valley, filling the sky with a thunder that does not belong to storms. And Ezekiel realizes, whatever is about to happen, he will not be able to forget it. Neither will we. Because the silence has broken, and the bones have begun to move. The valley is alive with noise. Bones grind against bones. Skulls roll across the dust. Hands of bone claw their way toward spines and ribs. It is not harmony. It is chaos. A sound so unnatural it makes the prophet's skin crawl. The clattering is deafening, like 1,000 drums beaten out of rhythm, echoing across the dead valley. And then, shapes begin to form. What was scattered begins to join. Ribs curve back into cages, spines straighten and lock, skulls tip into place on necks, arms stretch across the sand, pulling themselves toward sockets. The valley is assembling itself, piece by piece, form by form. But what are these shapes? Ezekiel cannot look away. Every new form terrifies him more. The valley is no longer still, but it is not yet alive. These figures are halfway between death and life, shadows of men, waiting for something. And here lies the haunting question. What will they become? Will they rise with flesh, faces restored, voices returned? Will they breathe again, walk again, remember again? Or will they remain as skeletons, soulless armies of bone, clattering mockeries of life, summoned only for terror and war? And deep, ere still, what would it mean if they did rise? Would God raise them to comfort his people, a promise of hope for exiles in despair? Or would this be something greater, something darker, an echo of the final day, when every grave on earth will answer to his voice? Ezekiel does not yet know. He can only watch. The bones are formed, but they are incomplete. The figures lie silent, hollow, empty. It is as if the valley itself holds its breath, as if the whole earth waits for the next command. And in that waiting, one question remains, heavier than ever. Can these bones live? And if they can, what kind of life awaits them? The valley is no longer a graveyard. It is something worse. All around Ezekiel, the bones have gathered. Skeletons stand where skulls once lay scattered. Forms have taken shape, eerie and incomplete, like soldiers waiting for a command, like statues carved from emptiness. But they are still, silent, hollow. Bodies without breath, shapes without souls. It is the most terrifying sight of all, a host assembled, but lifeless. Ezekiel stares. What does this mean? Why summon the form of life only to leave it unfinished? Then the voice of God comes again, not a whisper, a command. Prophesy to the breath, prophecy, son of man, and say to the breath, come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe upon these slain, that they may live. The words strike Ezekiel with a new weight. Before he was told to speak to bones, now he is told to summon breath itself. Breath, the one thing that separates the living from the dead. In Hebrew, the word is ruach, breath, wind, spirit. The same word used when God breathed into Adam, and dust became man. The same word that carries storms, that fills sails, that whispers life into the lungs. And now, Ezekiel is told to command it, to call it from the four winds of the earth, to draw it down into the valley of the dead. Can you imagine it? The prophet standing, in silence, staring at bodies that are whole but not alive, speaking to the invisible, summoning the unseen, commanding the very breath of God to enter the lifeless. But what will happen if it comes? Will these empty forms rise as men again? Will voices return, laughter return, hope return? Or will something far stranger take place? An army of shadows, a host of spirits filling empty shells, a vision not of comfort but of dread? The valley waits, the bones wait. The figures stand motionless, hollow, prepared for something that has not yet come. And Ezekiel, trembling, lifts his voice to the winds. Come from the four winds, O breath. The words hang in the air, and the earth itself seems to lean forward in silence. What happens when the Spirit answers? The valley does not yet say. Ezekiel has spoken. His voice has carried across the valley, calling not to men, not to kings, but to the very winds of the earth. Come from the four winds, O breath. Breathe upon these slain, that they may live. And then, silence. The bodies stand assembled, but unmoving, ribs locked, arms stiff, skulls tilted upward as though listening, empty forms poised like statues, waiting for something more. The air itself feels heavy. The desert wind, once howling, is gone. The sky holds its breath, and Ezekiel waits. What happens when a prophet calls the breath of God into the lifeless? The question presses harder now than ever before, because the bodies are complete. They stand in ranks, countless as sand, shaped as men but hollow as clay jars. What are they? If breath enters them, will they rise as Israel once was, whole, hopeful, alive? Or will they become something unrecognizable, soulless vessels, animated but empty, a haunting army of shadows? And deeper still, why would God do this? Is this only for Ezekiel's eyes, a vision of hope for exiles crushed under Babylon? Or is it a window into something far greater, far darker? The final day when every grave across the earth must answer the voice of the Almighty. The valley offers no answer. The figures wait. Their silence is unbearable, their stillness more terrifying than death itself. It is as though the entire valley is leaning forward, caught between nothing and everything. Ezekiel's words linger. Breathe upon these slain, and still they wait. What happens when the breath finally comes? Will it be life, or will it be something else entirely? The prophet cannot know, neither can we. Not yet. The valley holds its silence. The army waits. The question hangs heavier than ever. Can these bones live? The silence cannot hold forever. Ezekiel's words still hang in the valley air. Come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe upon these slain that they may live. And then something shifts. The wind stirs, soft at first, like a whisper crawling through the dust. Then stronger, it whirls through the valley, carrying with it a sound that is not of earth, a sound older than time, the breath, It sweeps across the valley like a storm unseen. Ezekiel feels it strike his face, cold and alive at once. He feels it press against his chest as though the spirit itself is passing through him. And then it happens. The bodies move, not one, not a few, all. Chests rise, ribs expand, hollow jaws snap shut as unseen lungs drag in air. Empty sockets blaze as though fire has been struck behind them. The valley thunders with the sound of breath entering what was once dust. Ezekiel watches in awe and terror, because these are no longer lifeless forms. They are no longer statues of bone and sinew. They are alive. An army. Not skeletons, not corpses. Men. Countless men standing shoulder to shoulder, their faces turned upward, their chests heaving with breath. From silence to storm, from bones to bodies, from death to life. The prophet cannot count them all. He cannot take in the sight. The valley that once reeked of death now shakes with the sound of law. If an army so vast it seems to stretch beyond the horizon, and God speaks again, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. They say, our bones are dried up, our hope is lost, we are cut off. But I will open your graves, and you shall live. I will put my spirit within you, and you shall live, and I will place you in your land again. The meaning pierces through the vision. Israel thought itself finished, cut off, dead as bones. But God was not finished. What was scattered, he would gather. What was silent, he would awaken. Yet the vision does not end with Israel alone. The image lingers, larger, heavier, echoing across the ages. Because if God can do this for bones in a valley, what does it mean for the graves of the earth? Is this only history? Or is it a glimpse of the final day, when graves across the world will open, when the dead of every nation will rise, when the question is finally answered for all mankind? Can these bones live? The rattling fades. The vision lifts. Ezekiel is left trembling, breathless, undone. But the question remains, haunting, eternal. If God can summon life from bones, what might he summon from you? The vision fades, but its meaning strikes deeper than any sword. God explains to his trembling prophet, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. They say, our bones are dried up, our hope is lost, we are cut off. But I will open your graves and bring you into the land of Israel again. At last, the purpose is clear. The bones were not only bones, they were Israel. Broken, scattered, lifeless, stripped of dignity and hope. A people who whispered in Babylon, we are finished, we are cut off, we are as good as dead. And God's answer was thunder. No, you are not finished, not in Babylon, not in despair, not in exile. Because he is the God who does not leave his people buried. He does not forget. He does not abandon. Even when they lie like bones in the dust, he speaks and they rise. For Ezekiel's listeners, the message must have struck like lightning. Here were a people who thought the covenant was broken, who believed their story had ended. And suddenly, hope. A promise that their nation crushed under Babylon would breathe again. This was not just comfort, it was resurrection. Not of individuals, not yet, but of a people, a national rising, a declaration that exile was not the end of Israel's story. Imagine what it meant to them. Sitting by foreign rivers, their harps hung on trees, their songs silenced by sorrow. And suddenly, this vision, the dead bones of a nation gathered into an army by the word of the Lord. It was more than prophecy. It was identity restored. But still, the vision holds a shadow larger than Babylon, larger than Israel's exile. Because it asks a question that history cannot contain. If God can raise a nation from dust, can he not also raise the dead themselves? Was this vision only about Israel's return to the land, or was it a window into the greater resurrection, the day when graves everywhere will open? The promise was certain. I will put my spirit within you, and you shall live. But the depth of those words, how far they reach, how wide they echo, is still haunting us. The prophecy gave Israel hope, but it left behind something greater, something that still stirs questions to this day. Because if God could take bones from a valley and raise them into an army, what does that mean for every grave across the world? The vision refuses to stay in Babylon. It stretches across time, whispering of something larger than Israel's return, a mystery about the very end of history itself. Can the dead rise? This was not a new question. Centuries before, Job had asked it, "If a man dies, shall he live again?" Generations later, Daniel would prophesy of a day when many who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to, O everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. And here stands Ezekiel, staring at bones rattling in the dust, watching them rise at the breath of God. What else could this mean, except that the Lord of Israel is also the Lord of life? For Israel, it was reassurance. God can raise a nation. But for us, it is haunting promise. God can raise the dead. Imagine it, the graves of kings and beggars, prophets and peasants, tyrants and slaves. The dust of centuries, the bones of the forgotten, the ashes of the lost, called to rise by the same voice that shook the valley. It is terrifying. It is glorious. It is the hope and the fear of all humanity. Because resurrection is not only life returned, it is judgment. To live again is to stand before the one who gave the breath. And so the valley of dry bones is more than a metaphor. It is a mirror showing us what God can do with the dead, with the hopeless, with the forgotten. Israel heard in it the promise of return from exile. But we, centuries later, hear something more, a whisper of the final resurrection, a shadow of that day when graves will open, when the sea will give up its dead, when dust will become flesh again, and when the question asked in that valley will finally be answered for all creation, can these bones live?